Dear listener, before the story begins, I ask you to subscribe to my channel. This is the best motivation at the start. And we are starting. Hi everyone, let me share my story with you. I'm currently 42, and she's only 26. I don't want to dwell on the age gap, as it never felt like an issue for us, and we were completely at ease together. I appear around 10 years younger, and my active lifestyle keeps me in great shape, both physically and emotionally. Our paths crossed when she was 17, and we began cohabitating about a year later. For 6 years, everything was wonderful.
She absolutely adored me. We rarely argued, and she had no complaints. We did everything as a couple. I introduced her to the adult world, offering guidance, advice, and unwavering support. Our relationship followed a leader-follower dynamic, as she lacks initiative. Initially, I attributed her immaturity to her age, hoping that over time and under my influence, things would improve. However, it started to become slightly irritating. She enjoyed a carefree life because I would always handle everything, be present, and provide support. But overall, I was content with this arrangement, as I prefer this type of relationship. In the beginning, our intimate life was also satisfying, but looking back, I realize it was more of a compromise on her part than genuine attraction or passion. She primarily derived psychological satisfaction from it. Naturally, I was her first partner. Gradually, disagreements arose regarding our intimate life, as I desired more emotional engagement from her, and the frequency was unsatisfactory. Attempts to discuss this always ended with her becoming hysterical and storming out. She is someone who doesn't handle criticism well, even when delivered gently. This causes her to have ongoing issues in her relationships with others. As for my shortcomings, I acknowledge that perhaps I didn't allocate enough time due to my hectic work schedule. However, we spent every weekend together and took annual summer trips to the seaside. I'm not an overly romantic person, so flowers and other thoughtful gestures are usually reserved for special occasions and not frequent. Even without a specific reason, I always tried to add variety to our leisure activities, such as movies, socializing with friends, dining out, and outdoor excursions. Of course, I took care of her, managed all household responsibilities, and addressed any issues related to her health, work, or studies. Her only household contribution was cooking. Until she finished college and started working, she was entirely dependent on me financially. Even while employed, she spent her entire salary on herself.
The problems began when she entered the workforce. Initially, she would come home exhausted, eat, and go straight to bed. I empathized with her situation, especially since she is quite frail and prone to illness. However, 2 years passed without significant changes. We started to grow apart. She complained that I was restricting her freedom and preventing her from being independent, even though she struggled to do anything independently. And even when she did, I had to intervene later to avoid complications. No one was limiting her in any way. She simply needed to make a theatrical display of being an adult, knowing that I would resolve any issues regardless. She constantly whined about being bored, yet she showed no personal interest in anything, didn't read books, and spent every evening watching reality shows like Dom 2, celebrity gossip, and fashion programs. I made earnest attempts to change the situation, sometimes resorting to force during her tantrums. I didn't physically assault her, but I admit to slapping her to bring her back to reality and holding her under cold running water. However, nothing changed, whether through conversation, affection, or force. Then one day, I discovered that she had some new friends, a group of idle 19 and 23-year-olds she found entertaining. I accessed her phone and found a romantically themed correspondence. Instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to gather information about the individual. What I discovered was shocking. Her chosen partner is 3 years her junior, a chronic alcoholic, a dealer of illegal substances, and is addicted to these substances himself. He was also institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital due to the consequences of his substance abuse. He has a criminal record, is unemployed, and has never held a job. His mother gave birth to him when she was 16, and when he was 13, she moved abroad, leaving his upbringing uncertain. He has never met his father. He is covered in tattoos with provocative themes and constantly gets new ones. They tell her how amazing he is, that he has plenty of money and connections. In reality, he has nothing, owning only one pair of pants and underwear. Their entire time together is spent hanging out at his apartment or visiting his friends. There are no cultural activities, as he lacks the funds. His specialty is incessantly talking about love, sending numerous texts throughout the day, and promising her a heavenly life. I revealed everything to her and took her to the police. They explained the situation to her there as well, providing all the information about his criminal record and substance abuse. They warned her that she could eventually find herself in trouble if she pursued a relationship with him. Her family members constantly try to reason with her. You know, she seemed to come to her senses. She changed her phone's SIM card. But 2 weeks later, she called him herself. Apparently, he was on a binge, not eating, and supposedly on the verge of dying from it. She felt sorry for him, thinking he was so miserable, and so on. She went to him and bought food to feed him. He continuously whispers in her ear about undying love, sends dozens of texts daily, and promises to change, quit drinking, and find a job. However, he sleeps until noon and then spends time with friends until night. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went to the apartment where he lives, and she happened to be there at the time. He ran into another room and locked himself in. I nearly dragged her out of there by her hair and brought her home, but it didn't have a lasting effect. Now she has finally left me for him. Every day at her own expense she brings him bags of groceries, and he feeds her promises that he's about to get a job. Of course, I realize that she is utterly foolish. But after so many years of being in a relationship and living as a family, it's difficult to forget everything immediately. My pride is also wounded. As a result, I am in a deep state of depression. I would appreciate hearing people's opinions on this matter. A friend of mine shared a rather ambiguous opinion with me about all of this. They suggested that you were simply content with a young, obedient, non-proactive and immature woman, and that you poorly introduced her to adult life. Any efforts to teach her independence were met with tears. Either she's afraid or she doesn't know how. She has a paralyzing fear of interacting with strangers. Certainly I recognized that something was amiss and was conscious of my actions. Her father passed away when she was 12. She moved to another city for her studies and lived with her sister. We met a year later. As for separating her from this drug-dealing addict, it won't be possible. She is entirely under his influence. Everyone has become an enemy to her. Me, her mother, her sister. She doesn't listen to anyone. She believes we are slandering him and that he has had a difficult life. Her goal is to support him. She openly states, "I'll clothe him, I'll find him a job, I'll make him study." And he constantly lies to her, claiming to have his own business, work as a security guard, or have acquaintances who will set him up as a taxi driver and so on. From what I understand, he makes a living by selling these substances. His mother occasionally sends him money. All of his friends are just like him, unemployed, drinking, and using. Any attempts to open her eyes are immediately met with aggression and door slamming. She insists that he's actually a good person, but no one supports him except for her. He is also involved in criminal activities. He was once convicted for attempting to bribe a department employee, presumably to pass something prohibited to the zone. She is aware of all of this, by the way. I would like to provide some additional details. These events have been unfolding over the past 3 months. During this time, she started smoking excessively. She experiences constant nervous breakdowns, hysterics, and heart attacks. She currently resides with her mother. Whenever this happens, she immediately calls me, even in the middle of the night, and asks me to come and be with her. This has occurred more than once. Of course, I go to her, sit by her side, and take care of her. If necessary, I take her to the hospital for an IV. It even reached a point where I had to take her to a mental hospital for a consultation with a psychiatrist. She exhibited very concerning tendencies, if you understand what I mean. And after all of this is the gratitude I receive. She hasn't once apologized or expressed thanks. Naturally, the police matters were handled informally. It was suggested to put him under surveillance. But this is not a quick process. He works as a courier. He takes the money, then delivers the goods, so to speak. That's it. He needs to be caught red-handed with it. But it's not that simple. Moreover, he seems to have realized that he's under special scrutiny and is being extremely cautious, as she herself mentioned. He changes phone numbers and walks down the street constantly looking around and monitoring others. Well, a couple of words about her upbringing and introduction to adult life. First and foremost, she witnessed my way of life, my circle of friends, my actions, and my interests through personal example. I always tried to discuss life issues and situations with her, recommended things for her to read and watch. I have friends who are about 10 years younger than me. We often spent leisure time together as a group, and the girlfriends of these friends around her age were present. Of course, we engaged in discussions and conversations, so in principle she shouldn't have been bored or uninterested. But I never could have imagined that she would be drawn to completely brainless, immature youngsters. In his circle, there are 19-year-old guys, and she's interested in them. I have female acquaintances her age, but compared to her, believe me, it's like night and day. They are driven, curious, principled, and ambitious. And most importantly, they have the option to go with the flow as well. In some cases, parents can provide support, and in others, a husband. But they're not interested in that. The psychiatrist mentioned that she has a hypertrophied emotional perception of reality. Her mind takes a back seat, and emotions dictate everything. I spoke with him and explained the entire situation. But upon leaving the office, she declared, "I don't want anyone to lecture me about life. I'll figure it out on my own." Generally, any attempts to appeal to reason in any situation have always been met with fierce resistance from her, regardless of who was speaking to her. Me, her mother, a friend, or her sister. It made no difference. She would immediately become extremely irritated. It's not entirely clear to me how, after living for so many years in a certain domestic and psychological environment with me, such a drastic shift occurred in a completely opposite direction. For example, I don't understand how, at his workplace, he works in an office, but she interacts and befriends not the office workers, but the unskilled laborers and loaders, and this level now pleases her. In the current situation, it is absolutely incomprehensible to me what could be of interest to her with underage, uneducated hooligans with addictions. Girls usually go through such phases at 17, but not at 26. As for what I want, of course, my rational mind understands that even if she returns, nothing good will come of it. But the heart cannot be commanded. The thought constantly spinning in my head is, what if? I figuratively mentioned the police. It's an acquaintance, sort of from the Federal Drug Control Service. Regarding the alcohol, this is based on what she told me. He allegedly informed her that he has alcohol problems and was treated in a mental hospital, supposedly trying to quit, which caused his mind to go off. There was a situation where, after a conversation with the Federal Drug Control Service, she changed her SIM card and didn't communicate with him for 2 weeks. Then she met him, and she told me that he had lost half his weight because he was drinking himself to death. What's really going on there? Alcohol or substances? I don't know anymore. But the fact that he sells is 100% certain. My guess is that he's using as well. I'm not an expert, but the symptoms are as I described. He can talk to her on the phone for hours in monologue mode. He can call multiple times in the middle of the night, even knowing she has to go to work in the morning. It's like a form of zombification is taking place. When talking to him, she only agrees. Also, someone claiming to be his brother, supposedly an authority figure sitting in places not so far away, periodically calls her and psychologically manipulates her as well. In reality, it's unclear who this person is, but he's older than him. We checked everything. There is no brother. A person can call from a neighboring house and introduce himself as anyone. He was in a madhouse. It probably only remains to clarify the information on the diagnosis. Yes, the girl has a large registered package of shares in a large monopoly, a share in real estate, all from her parents. But all of this is set aside for the future. However, the term large doesn't imply that she can buy a mansion in Monte Carlo. There's enough for a 2-room apartment, no more. The immediate task is to prevent her from hitting rock bottom. Everything else is secondary. Currently, there is simply no relationship to speak of. As for saving her, how can you not want this? After all, her future is not just uncertain, it is predictably grim. Well, about love. It's difficult to fall out of love instantly if you truly love someone, even in the face of betrayal. Many here, for some reason, perceive our relationship as a kind of misalliance, as if I'm a classic sugar daddy and she's a kept woman. But that's absolutely not how it was. There was mutual love and affection. She never made any monetary demands. From my side, of course, there was care, support, and guardianship. But in general, this is normal. Any loving man would do the same. It wasn't in some hypertrophied form, though. No one was blowing dust off of her. I had to do some things myself after fruitless attempts to get her to act independently. But that's already a reflection of her character and mine. In general, after a few months, maybe weeks, I will write here on the channel again and share an update on how things are at that moment. Thank you for listening, and please advise me on how to proceed correctly. I'm very confused. Although, man, you're not stupid.